Welcome, everyone. Peace and love from the Atlantean consciousness. This is Grand Master Dr. Thor Templar, and I'm your guide from the sewer pipe of reality that we live in, the bright white light of gnosis, to enlighten all those that hear my voice. And this is another in the series of media. We're going to talk about another favorite person of mine. And we're going to cover all facets of media. There's radio. I'm going to talk about the historic Art Bell in another audio. We're going to cover today George Noory, otherwise known as George Ralph Noory, born in 1950, who's a talk show host of Coast to Coast, took over from Art Bell, who had a many million listener audience, and who was, it was just the right time. Things were big then. The 80s and 90s was another one of those major golden age of, you could say, metaphysics or the unknown. It's hard, what do you call all this? But so it was a big time, and Art Bell was just very lucky and test marketed his metaphysical show as a Friday show for maybe a year or so before he actually took it full time. But we're not talking about Art Bell. I'll get to him. We're talking about George Noory. He's 65 now. He's from Detroit, Michigan. He has a BA from the University of Detroit. And which is quite interesting. He was brought up as a Roman Catholic. He is Lebanese. Both parents were Lebanese. His father was an Egyptian Lebanese who worked at Ford Motor Company, and his mother was an American Lebanese. And his qualifications to be on the show is that as a child, he became interested with the paranormal and UFOlogy, and joined the UFO organization NICAP as a teenager. That's his qualifications, people. National Investigating Committee on Aerial Phenomenon. Started in 1956, defunct in 1980, headquartered in a nonprofit organization, headquartered in, of all places, get the connections, Washington, D.C. And of course, at that time, these programs were taken very seriously, and we really must look at an organization that is based in Washington, D.C. It was founded by Thomas Townsend Brown, one of these people that had different scientific discoveries. The board of governors includes 70 prominent men at that time, including Donald Keyhole, Major USMC. Retired. Was retarded, as we say. So on the board of directors was a Marine Major and head of, or worked with guided missiles, which is quite interesting. And another retired Navy man of the name of Delmer Fairey. So needless to say, CIA all the way. Allegedly. So, this great interest of this field, so he attended University of Detroit, spending 2 years in pre-dental programs. So, he wanted to become a dentist. And either the program was too hard or he got sick of bad breath, I'm not sure. And he decided to switch over to something a lot easier. Generally, he majored in communications. Generally, people do that because it's one of the easiest things in colleges to take. So anyone listening to my voice, you have to be an idiot to go to college and take a hard course when you can get a degree by studying communications. And apparently graduated with a bachelor's degree in 1972 in communications. Now, as far as I understand, becoming a dentist is not a scientist. It's a medical area. And communications ain't science either. And after all this, for some bizarre reason, Noory served 9 years in the United States Naval Reserve as a lieutenant. Now, I don't know if they helped with education that he had to do that or not, but it's interesting that he was in the ROTC program and is directly connected to two government agencies, the Naval Reserves and a government UFO organization. Taking this great communication skills and all he knows, he began a radio career as a newscaster in Detroit station from 1974 to 1978. He was a news producer and executive news producer at a TV station in Detroit. He later served as a news director in Minneapolis and as a news director in St. Louis. Very typical of that industry. You move around a lot. It doesn't seem like any of these people stay around. He won 3 local Emmy Awards for his work in TV news. So apparently his running as a news director, you decide what goes on. Isn't that interesting? You make decisions of how things are stated, what is reported on. Very control place. Well, apparently it took the notice of, or they were told to assist and give him Emmy Awards. After his little stint of getting these awards, or being given them, or told to be given them, in St. Louis, look, after all this, what did this guy do? And of course, he's got all this great, interest in metaphysics and the UFOs, because as a teenager, he saw a dot in the sky and joined some organization as a teenager. Which I wonder if they even allowed kids in there. I wonder really what that organization is all about. But I guess anybody can join anything. You send them whatever small pittance was needed back then, or maybe there wasn't any fees at all. But after all this, in St. Louis, Noory formed Norcom Communications, a company that developed and marketed video training films. Guess who? For law enforcement and security agencies. And that ain't the local guy, that ain't the security guard company around the street. That's government agencies. In 1987, to add to his credentials to host a talk show on metaphysics, Noory and his partners in Norco, Restaurants Incorporated, apparently a new thing, opened Cafe Marrakesh and Oasis Bar in Brentwood, Missouri. Was the place haunted? In 1996, apparently, I'm assuming the restaurants and everything else must have dumpered, because he then hosted a late-night radio program called Nighthawks in St. Louis, which caught the attention of executives at Premier Radio Network, syndicators of the Coast to Coast AM. Coast to Coast AM is a North American late-night talk show that deals with a variety of topics, frequently ones that relate to the paranormal and conspiracy. Well, that wasn't the case. They originally started off, Art Bell's original show was a political talk show, and I think it was 3 or 4 hours a night. He would speak about political subjects, and How and why he wandered into metaphysics, we don't know, but it used to be the final show of the week, the bust-out show, the fun time, which I'm assuming when ratings really go down in radio shows because it's Friday night, everybody's out and about, and so it was what the hell type of thing, and he threw up these subject matters, and they started to catch on, and that's the show that I went on for 3 or 4 hours. I don't remember what it was. It 5 hours? I think it was 5 hours. That I went on and spoke with Bell, and that's another story in general. But being the geniuses that all media is, they got the most qualified person they possibly can. But let's understand that he didn't take over the show from him. He was appointed after other people. So, he started out as a guest host for Coast to Coast AM before replacing Ian Puckett as the Sunday night host. In January 2003, following Art Bell's retirement, Noory took over as a weeknight host of the Coast to Coast AM show. So, by then I was not listening to Art Bell's show or anything else, but apparently he came in while Bell was still there doing I guess all his other businesses failed. He couldn't whore himself out any further to his owners at the federal government and law enforcement, apparently, or this was all part of the plan, which is probably most likely. It was all part of the plan. Of course, he's got his mediocre background, but let's remember there were other people that came after Art Bell and people like Hilly Rose, who's been on California radio for many years, with no metaphysical background whatsoever.
Oh, it's an interest of mine. I read a book on psychic when I was 12.
Whitley Strieber has been there frequently, and I think did a Saturday night show for a long time. The guy who spent all his life saying he didn't believe in aliens, and this was just a strange psychological story, to all sorts of information that aliens are real. Of course, I wonder how many government checks he cashes. You know, that he's just like all the other alleged government whores, and gave up his place where he knew aliens made contact with him. His own statement now: I wanted to go back to Texas and have barbecues like normal Texas idiots. Well, the fact that he's from Texas ought to tell you a lot about where his money is coming from, but he gave up his alien contact house so that he could have barbecues in Texas. And, of course, you couldn't afford to keep that house. Whitley, you're not selling enough books. Make up some more stories. Or can't your government contacts get you another bestseller? So, this guy who has absolutely no background, has no interest in anything, he has a passing interest. He certainly hasn't done anything in those areas, hasn't written any books. He opened a restaurant. He didn't open a metaphysical-based business. I mean, the fact that you have some, and this is you're going to find as a typical scenario case with a lot of these ghost hunter types that say, yeah,
A ghost. I saw a ghost when I was 10, and now I'm a ghost hunter.
I mean, it's literally true, people. And one guy who had a near-death experience because he almost died in an accident. That's not a near-death experience, people. That's when you see things and have a metaphysical. A near-death don't mean near-death. I mean, all of us have near-death experiences. I don't think anybody has went through life that hasn't almost died from a sickness or other things. So I guess we're all near-death experts. But here is this giant AM coast-to-coast show. Originally, of course, Art Bell was not doing a metaphysical show, so he just kind of did that himself, and it just happened to work out. But nobody there had any background whatsoever, and the only person they ever brought in that had any kind of background was Whitley Strieber. And I don't think having a background as writing of your experiences with extraterrestrials is a full enough background to be involved in a show about metaphysics, mysteries of the universe and the unknown. I don't think that qualifies you for that, but at least it's something. Of course, his story changed quick, as I just mentioned. In December 2012, Gaiam TV launched Beyond Belief with George Noory, a subscription-based webcast exploring the unknown and mysteries of the universe. This one-hour weekly series features Noory taped in front of live audience at Gaiam Studios in Boulder, Colorado. Boulder, Colorado. Right next to the government huge facilities at Cheyenne Mountain. Beyond Belief with George Noory is available exclusively on Gaiam TV.
Can't wait to get that one.
So it's, this guy has absolutely no background. He has a bad voice. He doesn't communicate well. I have no like for him whatsoever. I wasn't a big fan of Art Bell either, and for a guy who claimed to be so metaphysical, he certainly treated me with his how much he loved Jesus attitude on that show fairly poorly in terms of what was going on there. But, it just shows where their background is coming from. I mean, here's another, Art Bell is another Navy guy with a radio background, So that gives him, because he knows how to work the switches and do the, the Morse code. Yeah, he should host a show. And we're going to play Morse code all night to the audience.
You get big ratings.
So, it's one of those things that we get is the blind leading the blind. I mean, there is no qualified people out there that has any knowledge in these backgrounds whatsoever that they can find to host a radio talk show, somebody interesting. I find that very hard to believe. There are people out there who have written many different books. There are different authors and other things that you would think, I don't know if they're any good on the air or not. To be a good talk show host, you got to be a little crazy and dramatic like myself. Who, by the way, at that time, after being on Art Bell's show, offered my services to their company, which they did not take. Because after all, they're waiting for
George. He made videos for law enforcement and was in the Navy.
Well, oh, my soul to Washington, D.C. So, to show you how these things drop, and of course, it seems to me it's just bad business. And, people who do things like this should consult professional occultists. Art Bell had an audience of somewhere from 6 to 12 million listeners. Now, this was a height of the rage of this, and people were into everything there. Occultism, alternative technologies, conspiracies, the Montauk Project, time travel. This was huge back when Bell grabbed upon it. The books being published, the people interested in it. And a lot of this was pre-internet, and there's just a lot going on. And, of course, pre-internet means that people were listening to the radio by the millions because that's where you got information. Noory's listeners are 275,000. Looky where! I'll just drop my pants. Wow. Seems like it's pretty bad business to me. Also states here, which is interesting about him, and I don't know, this is somebody's personal opinion, but even though that they state all these things, and of course apparently the radio stations and its working with or fear of domain states, what's interesting here is a little statement, is that, however, with all these bad numbers and loss of profits and all the other things, George Noory is the perfect front man, and his numbers take a secondary. How is that? How can your numbers take a secondary because you're paid by that? It's all about your ratings. This what the ratings you get, or the number of people listening or watching to TV, determines what you charge for commercials on there. So in the Super Bowl, it's, what is it, 50 million, 5 million, 10 million, for 30 seconds or something ridiculous, or is that 50 million? So I'm not sure, but it's all based because there are billions of people watching that, so you get a lot of money for it. But it says here it takes secondary level of importance because he's very good at protecting the corporate turf and is very careful to only take risks on subjects that the corporate sponsors do not care about, such as crystal skulls, near-death, psychic mediums, etc. You know, fluffy New Age stuff. Unlike a lot of people that think that, and of course, Art Bell is an interesting character. I mean, some very tragic things have happened in his life which seem to be demand sponsored by. Gone are the days of former days of Art Bell's hard-hitting journalism, which made the spooks inside the alphabet soup agencies very uncomfortable. Apparently that is true, even though Art Bell himself is ex-military, but he put a lot of nutballs on and made statements, but that's good entertainment. I would not give them the credibility that he does, because he rarely came back at anybody, similar to Ed Dames, the nutball army remote viewer who claimed to see aliens behind every rock. Maybe he was a reincarnation of the anti-communist movement who saw communists every other rock. So, and Noory has stated that it doesn't matter whether he believes what his callers and guests say. Ultimately, it's about entertainment. Creating a show that people will be drawn to and listen to, all 300,000 of them instead of 6 million, is what he believes in. And, of course, it mentions here that, you know, one of their frequent guests, and he was a host, Whitley Strieber's comment that Noory's style is not that he's credulous or easily led. He's willing to take these intellectual journeys. He has guests on that you think are completely off the wall. Nothing they say is real, but by the end of the program, you've made a discovery that there is a kernel of question worth exploring. Of course, typical statement from Whitley Strieber means a bunch of crap. Art Bell has come out of retirement recently and has asked me to be a guest on his show, which I don't intend on doing at this time, because of how crappy Noory has done things. Noory having ruined the Coast to Coast franchise by taking it in a political talk direction. And so I don't listen to it, I don't know. I mean, if he's having, as it states here, he's having Alex Jones as a regular guest, that is, you know, when you get into the conspiracy and politics things, I mean, that is a segment of all this area, but you have to be very careful because that becomes a huge kind of discussion unto itself that can really encompass everything. And this is even something that I've moved somewhat away from in our Jedi school, because we don't have too many links to these kind of conspiracy things, because it's a never-ending thing. And apparently Noory even has guests on that were banned by Art Bell, whatever that means. As I said, I'm not a huge fan of Art Bell, but there's like everything out there. So, you know, this whole talk radio area was first started in terms of metaphysicals talking about, which was shocking at the time, and where some of my introductions came to things such as radionics and even crystals. From Bill Jenkins, a Los Angeles radio host that was on, I think, once a week, had this show on. He had the first guy on, the first real metaphysical book that I bought. Was the Crystal book by Dale Walker, who was on that show, and you could send money to wherever it was and get his book. And that was the first book I ever got on crystals. And Dale Walker was the first person to really talk about crystals in a metaphysical way. And Bill Jenkins was a very credible guy, had done a lot of research, was into radionics, into alternative energy, and was a serious researcher and a journalist. And his show, I don't think his show lasted all that long. And for some reason, he dropped out of the whole scene. I don't know why, or if he was forced out, or what happened. You know, the dirty underside of the filthy, stinking society we live in rears its ugly head all too often. I heard him a few years back state that he was offered a hell of a lot of money to come back, with the big success of Art Bell and others, to come back, and he turned it down. I'm not sure why. Of course, he wanted to be very serious, and unfortunately, which is the problem with the media in general, and something I will discuss in other audios, it's hard to eat your morality. Unfortunately, so everything has to do with money and survival. Apparently he was able to do that, but he, instead of dropping in the scene somewhere, he dropped out of the scene. So I'm going to do some research on him to find out what he's up to, if anything. He may be dead by now. But that was the early 70s, and you could listen to all these wild topics before they were so popular, and there were books everywhere. As I said, the first book on crystals. Wow. Radionics, what the hell is that? So this is the kind of qualifications. And what's important here is not the buffoonish idiots that this Noory is. It's the fact of this is who's put on the air in major time slots. And it appears in many ways that Bell was forced out. His children was attacked and molested. As it goes, his wife died. There's some pretty scary shit went on in Bell's life. And I have to wonder if these things weren't targeted through use of military psychotronic weapons, which I'm an expert in. But the whole idea is what does all that mean? This is the kind of crap, just like the people who are doing ghost shows now, that have absolutely no credibility, that have no backgrounds except they're film students. Here's a guy with one link after another to government, industries, and even to the point of having extremely personal contact by selling and making law enforcement training videos. Now, how the hell did he get involved in all that? You can't be more up the ass of the man than doing things like that. And obviously along the way here, he got further involved, and they kept him in the back so they could push him ahead, probably planning exactly for what happened as soon as they could get Bell out. Followed by the company going along. You either take the silver or take the lead off of your camera fills. Well, you can take the silver or we can take the lead. It's up to you. So their revenues, which must have been in the tens of millions, dropped down to the hundreds of thousands to put on this buffoonish idiot. And by the way, Noory's worth about, I think, if we look at it, $2 million, which isn't all that much. That's a couple of houses in Southern California. But he makes $500,000 a year for this joke job that he was given by his masters. Not a bad salary. I'll take it. Sign me up. I can live on that. Be tough, but I can live on $500,000 a year, talking for 3 hours a night. So there we go again, boys and girls. Are we happy that we have these qualified people out there representing all these very important areas of new science, old science, ufology, metaphysics, the occult? All of these people are just so skilled and know so much about it and are so positioned and have, like most of these people are, have on all the authors that are basically hawking their books, and professional goofballs that are able to hawk themselves or set themselves up with employers, with publishers, I should say, that get on his show frequently. So the blind leading the blind, bringing on buffoonish idiots that perpetrate more and more stupidity. This is what you have. Just understand that when you watch TV, listen to radio, that there's no credibility behind these people at all. And that goes in everything they do in life. And the supposed degrees and licenses that people have are minor representations of their potential intelligence and skill in their particular field. Any kind of degree or license means you passed tests. Doesn't make you a good doctor, doesn't make you a good lawyer, and it sure as hell don't make you a good anything else by passing a test. And because there is none in the occult business, you have anybody who wants to put a few words on a page and can publish that, or can figure out how to make a website, and you can do that for free, as we all know, and they're there. So what does that mean? So it's just, we just tell everybody, be careful of whom and which, and don't believe anything. Be open-minded to the fact that, that's interesting. That's interesting opinion. And that's all it is. Whether it's expert opinion, whether it's educated opinion, whether it's opinion for opinion's sake, it's opinion. It is not truth. It is not a fact. The only thing that's a truth and a fact is that the guys in charge of all these things are stooges.